From Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio, this is All Access Med School Admissions, where we're bringing a voice to medical school admissions officers. Hello again, everybody. I'm Christian Essman, and welcome to this next episode of All Access, where today I'm going to be talking with my friend, Mr. Paul White. He's the Assistant Dean for Admissions and one of my best admissions buds from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Paul's experience in admissions is just vast. And before we get into my discussion with Paul, let me give you a little snapshot of Hopkins School of Medicine. Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine is located in Baltimore, Maryland, and they've been there since 1893. They're a private, non-denominational institution which fosters the training of medical practitioners, teachers, and biomedical scientists. Their mission at Johns Hopkins is dedicated to preparing students to practice compassionate medicine of the highest standards and to contribute to the advancement of medical knowledge. Hopkins accepts applicants from Canada, international students, and applicants who have the DACA status. Since they are a private institution, there's no in-state residency requirement. In 2018, the medical school received 6,322 applications, and they interviewed 668 applicants for a class size of 118. 58% of their 2018 entering class were comprised of women, and 22% self-identified as underrepresented in medicine. Now, based on AMCAS matriculant data for the entering class of 2018, 82% of the incoming students had community service or volunteer experiences, 88% had physician shadowing or clinical observation experiences, 91% had medical or clinical community service or volunteer experiences, 24% had some type of paid medical or clinical employment, and 96% had research or lab experience. The median GPA for students accepted to Hopkins in 2018 was 3.94, with a range of 3.8 to 4.0. While the median MCAT for accepted students was a 521, the range was 516 to 525. The curriculum at Johns Hopkins is called Genes to Society, and it's a pass-fail grading system in the first 2 years. The third and fourth year student grades are a tiered system of honors, high pass, pass, and fail. We'll get into some of the structure and the highlights of that Genes to Society curriculum during our discussion, so there'll be more on that later. Okay, so there you go. This interview with Mr. White comes in around about an hour and a half and is really a comprehensive discussion about the Hopkins admissions process and their curriculum. And we followed up our discussion where Paul and I talk about things regarding personal statements, and I think you're going to find that really informative. So here we go. Paul White from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. My friend Paul T. White has quite a long and storied career in admissions. Check this out. Mr. White has been affiliated with Johns Hopkins University since 1994, first as Director of Undergraduate Admissions and now as the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. In addition to his admissions position at the School of Medicine, he has also served as the Assistant Dean for Financial Aid. He now serves as a voting faculty member on the MD Admissions Committee and sits on the MD PhD Admissions Committee as well. From 2006 to 2012, Mr. White served as the Associate Dean for Admissions at the University of Minnesota Medical School before returning to Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in 2012. Mr. White's professional career began at Yale University in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, where he was an Assistant Director of Admissions for Yale College. He later served as an Associate Dean of Admissions at Hamilton College and as Senior Associate Dean of Admissions at Colgate University. Mr. White received his bachelor's degree in American Studies from Yale University and his Juris Doctorate degree from the Georgetown University Law Center. He has served as a member of the National Merit Corporation Scholarship Selection Committee, and he is a past president and co-founder of the Black Faculty and Staff Association of Johns Hopkins University. Wow. I have been lucky enough to call Paul one of my friends and admissions buddies for several years now, and I'm honored to have you with me today. Paul, welcome to All Access.
Well, thank you. It's a
well,
pleasure to be here.
I just read this your amazing bio. What haven't you done in admissions?
I haven't done law school admissions. How's that?
Well, let's unpack this a little. Like, how did you wind up in admissions in the first place?
When I graduated from college, which I won't mention the year, but it was some time ago, I was waiting to hear about a job. I knew I wanted to take a year off before going to law school. And I had applied for a job as a paralegal with a law firm in New York City. And since I was fairly close to New York City, being in Connecticut, my undergraduate dean asked me would I be willing to interview for the admissions office that first summer after graduating. And I said, sure. And those 3 months of the summer became 3 years in that office. And then I thought it was time to go on to my real career, or at least start my real career by going to law school. But while I was working in admissions at Yale, I became fascinated by issues that sort of came up against the legal area or legal arena, such as this was only a few years after the Bakke v. Davis case that established affirmative action. There were people who were threatening to sue over testing issues, applicants who had disabilities. So I thought, well, there is something that I could tie in to both admissions and to law, thinking I would go work for a traditional law firm after graduating. And yet I found, even going back to my first year of law school, that I really missed what I had been doing in admissions. And I was so used to telling people to find their passion, and here I realized I had found my passion. So after getting my law degree, I decided to go back into admissions, but using my legal education to be of benefit to the institutions, but within the admissions area. And that's what I've been doing for the past 36 years.
Wow.
33 years.
Yeah. So after law school, you went back to Yale?
No, after I completed my degree, I actually worked at Hamilton College.
Oh, that's when the Hamilton.
I decided I wanted to see something different. To me, it was easy, and I put that in quotation marks. I thought it was easy selling, if you will, or marketing, or speaking on behalf of my alma mater. But to be a professional, I thought it would be of greater use to work at an institution where I had no affiliations.
Yeah.
And that would help me develop professionally. And so I immediately went to work for Hamilton College, which was a great experience, but it was a little too small for me. And so I left after a couple of years to go to Colgate to be the senior associate dean eventually, and to actually help train almost an entirely new admission staff. And that was a terrific experience. And that led to my coming down to Hopkins in 1994 to become director of undergraduate admissions.
Wow. That's amazing.
There's a tie-in in all of this.
So what do you enjoy about? I mean, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, what's the passion? What's the hook?
As long as I've been doing this, Christian, I've never really ever gotten bored. I mean, there's enough variation from year to year that you don't get bored. And just when I think I've read it all or heard it all or seen it all, something else comes up, and I think, well, that's different. I've never been bored. Absolutely never been bored. It's I like intellectual challenges, and I've decided this can be an intellectual challenge at times.
Yeah.
So I try to get my get my hands around how to make this work for everyone.
Yeah, there's always something new we have to
Mhm.
do. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you do for fun? I mean, there's all your professional stuff. What do you do
Right.
for fun?
Well, I'm probably a little less boring than most people think because, or a little more boring than most people think,
Oh.
my life. But there are certain things like I've been in a book club for years, and um, I have, well, I was an American Studies major, so really concentrating on history and literature. So it's just natural that I would gravitate towards this book club, and I've been in it off and on for the past, I'll say, 16, 17 years.
Wow.
Um, I also absolutely love art, and
Oh.
Baltimore just has a couple of jewels in terms of art museums, and so I have actually joined one of the major museums here, and then I frequent the others as well. But I also love just, I won't call it street art, but art that isn't necessarily in a museum or gallery, but at
Uh-huh.
someone's home that they have for sale. And then there are art festivals in Baltimore.
Oh,
So
right.
I've really come to appreciate the smaller aspects of artwork here. And also, I am a foodie.
Uh-huh.
I enjoy cooking for my friends. I enjoy entertaining, and I enjoy eating out.
Yeah.
So, and
I
this
can
is
attest to
a
that. You
great
are
town for
good. You are
foodies.
good at picking restaurants.
Well, I've got a great place to be for that.
Yeah.
You can find almost anything you want in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I know. I can attest to that. That's awesome. What would you say, Paul? People know you know a lot of people. What do you find something people are surprised to learn about you?
um, well, usually my age. If I'm going to be honest,
Yeah, I agree. I would. Yep.
right? I mean, I'm a lot older than most people realize, and I don't know if that's because I'm juvenile or what with my presentation, but I think they expect people of a certain age to be broken down. That's just not me. I'm still fascinated by
Yeah.
everything and,
Yeah.
find interest in everything and everyone. So I think that's part of it. And the other part I think that surprises people is that I'm not from Baltimore, and yet I absolutely love living here.
Hmm.
Um, and I did not go to Hopkins, but I am a great fan of the institution.
You're actually from Pittsburgh, right?
I am. I'm
Yeah.
from the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah.
People from Pittsburgh would be highly insulted if I said Pittsburgh, since I live about 18 miles out. So I'm from the Pittsburgh area,
Area.
and I'm
Okay.
a huge fan of most things Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, we'll be clear about that. Well, let's dive into kind of the Johns Hopkins stuff.
Okay.
And start with like, so how does someone get into the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine? Let's start with the application process. Like,
Okay.
so somebody checks off Johns Hopkins on AMCAS,
Mhm.
and they get your secondary because you send it out to everybody, correct?
We do. Everyone who's been
Yeah.
verified, which is essentially everyone. Yes.
Right. So they submit it back to you.
Mhm.
What's your screening process like? What's that look like?
Well, I am really fortunate. I think just about every one of our screeners, it's a small group, by the way, but
Mhm.
every one of the screeners has been together as a group for years. I think there's one person, maybe two, who recently joined the group in the last 2 or 3 years. But there are people who were screening when I came over here from the undergrad in 2000. And they've
Oh,
been together for a couple of years, and they continue to screen. So, there isn't a lot of training that needs to be
yeah.
done.
It sounds like a very seasoned group. I'm sure you
They
guys
are
get.
very
Yeah.
seasoned, and yet they still ask lots of great questions and want to know what they should be doing differently. And I absolutely love that about this group. And they're all physicians or researchers here, PhD.
Oh, okay.
But there are only 8 of us, 7.
Wow.
So I have a great friend who's at the Ohio State
Uh-huh.
as the associate dean of admissions. You probably know him,
Quinn Capers, Dr.
right, Dr.
Capers.
Quinn
Yeah.
Capers. And we were recently talking, and I think he has something like 150 screeners. I almost fell over when he said that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We have 8, and a large group for us might be 10. And my question, is while a group that small, you run into the issue of very little variation. At this, I know that it's easy for me to check what others are doing, and there is consistency in what we're doing without being staid. It's just that or stolid in how we do things. We have consistency, so we don't want too much variation. I mean, and then we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this group has been, I think, fairly tight, and the quality is there just based on how they screen.
And you guys know each other. You all know each other, and you kind of know what each other likes. But these new questions come up, and so it probably
That's right.
it makes the process kind of efficient, though, too, because
It does.
everybody's very well versed in what they need to do and what they're looking for the
That's
most part.
exactly right. And efficiency is the key in admissions, as you well know. I mean, we don't, even though, our process is 6 months long in terms of from screening to interviewing to admitting and then trying to get them to commit to you. That's not a lot of time.
So does everybody get into a room like once a month or like?
Well, back in the early days of my tenure here, we did meet once a week in a room and to screen paper. Well, no one uses paper anymore, and it's all done electronically. But we find that it is still incredibly helpful to meet once a month. So we either gather in a room or we have a conference call where we talk about what we're seeing, what issues, what changes that they detect in terms of letters of recommendation or committee letters that they didn't recall seeing previously, or I will alert them to changes. Sometimes in the counseling staff, the pre-med advising staff, I'll say so-and-so is no longer there. So the tone of the letter may have changed. The structure of the letters may change from time to time. There are some schools, for instance, Yale will no longer be using the committee letter going forward. And so I want to make sure
for them.
Our committee is aware of that.
So when this group is going through all these applications, I read on the MSAR that says that Johns Hopkins is looking for students with unusual talents, strong humanistic qualities, demonstrated leadership. Like what things what kind of attributes, is there a level of importance that you put on certain experiences?
I don't want to say number one is number two, because I don't want students to go out there and say, I have to have this.
That's what I want to get away from. So
right, exactly. We don't want a checklist.
Yeah.
But there's no question we value lifelong learning and lifelong learners and people who have demonstrated that they are comfortable in an intellectual environment and ask questions. That has to be a given for us. What's also a given for us is that there is a real demonstrated commitment to clinical care and patient care. If you're not interested in working with patients, we're not going to be interested in you.
Yeah, good. Let's go there. What does that look like? Do they need to have a lot of shadowing, or do they need to be scribing? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I will say they don't have to have a lot of shadowing.
Okay.
Frankly, for me, shadowing is an introduction. It shouldn't be, it's an appetizer. It's not the entree. I want to see more than shadowing, but I think it's a great way of being introduced to patient care. But it has to go beyond that, and it has to inform them to the extent that they understand the role of a doctor in both treating a patient, but also as being a member of a team. And just to step back a second, Christian, that's what's also incredibly important to us. We want people who, two things, are accustomed to being a part of a team and are accustomed to serving.
Yeah.
I think that surprises people about Hopkins, when in fact, that's the one thing if you were to ask me, what did I notice 19 years ago that surprised me. It
Mm-hmm.
was how unbelievably collaborative
Hmm.
the faculty and the students were here.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievably collaborative.
So that's an important characteristic that you're looking for. It's some
Absolutely.
demonstrated teamwork, and that can come up. I have to say, probably guess in a variety of ways, right? If you're
Without
on,
question.
yeah,
If someone thinks if someone infers that I'm saying you have to be a member of a team, then they're inferring incorrectly.
mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm implying. What I'm saying is they have to know what it's like to work with others and give and take with others. And that doesn't have to be on a team, but it can
Mm-hmm.
be in an organization. It can be of two, a group
Mm-hmm.
of two, or it can be an academic study group, for instance. It
Yeah,
can be a yearbook. It can be a service organization. It just means that you're used to exchanging ideas with others, listening, giving, and leading. Hopefully, at some point, because we do
right.
for leaders.
Yeah. You said earlier that Johns Hopkins values students that are interested in lifelong learning.
Hmm.
How does an undergrad who has, they've gone from high school to undergrad and they're doing their their curriculum, their coursework, how do they demonstrate to you that they are like this lifelong learner? Are there certain qualities you're trying to tease out of their curriculum, or their coursework that you're diving into and kind of teasing out through their transcript?
Well, that's a good question. It's not so much the transcript. I think it's what your recommenders have to say about you.
Ah, right. Okay.
If your recommender says that although we only required X, this person wanted to know about X, Y, Z. So you're
Hmm.
going beyond the minimums
Yeah.
uh, in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the syllabus of the course for the course. You're asking questions that show you're able to integrate, synthesize ideas that you've learned from other areas.
Yeah, I'm emphatically nodding my head right now because I know those letters that you're talking about, where the professor says, not only did Samantha come to my office for questions, but she wanted to know more beyond the
Absolutely.
material.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
These are students. I mean, and not everyone can do that.
right.
I totally get that. But I'm not trying to admit 6,000 people. I just need 120. You know.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Um, are there any types of experiences that kind of jump out to your screeners that, like, whoa, that's cool, or wow, this is really, can you think of anything, or is it just comes up?
It just comes
Yeah.
up because I sometimes it's a function of circumstances, and some people are more fortunate than others, and
Mm-hmm.
we get that. And whether that be when I say fortunate, it doesn't have to be financially or economically fortunate. It may be resources available at their institutions.
Yeah.
But I think what really stands out for our committee is someone who goes beyond those resources or limitations, if you will, at their own institution or in their own backyard and seeks other experiences.
Yep. Yeah.
And someone who shows that kind of initiative will do well here.
Yeah, I was just saying to a student, an undergraduate today, like, it's very easy. We're all in these little bubbles of our campus. It's easy to just to stay in there.
That's right.
But you should be getting out into your community and doing things, because those are what your patients are going to look like.
That's exactly right.
Not all peers. Your
Right.
patients.
They may come to you, but you should know more about where they're coming from.
Yeah. Oh, great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great point. What about, okay, so Hopkins is a research powerhouse.
Well,
But there's research, it's not carved into the curriculum. So how do you guys value research?
Well, it is and it isn't. That's interesting because there are some schools that do it much more formally than we do. But for instance, at the end of your first year, all first year students have an opportunity to spend about 8 weeks or so doing research here.
Okay.
Funded through the Dean of Students office.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
So that's nice.
Yeah.
Some of those students will continue to do their research with their departments. The dean won't fund it after that, but the departments, if they have the funding, will help. Some students will take a semester or a year off because they are are that intrigued by what they're doing and realize they're close to a publication at some point. And it really, I think these changes all came about, or were most noticeable once we changed our curriculum about 10 or so years ago, that
Mm-hmm.
more and more of our students were actually doing research resulting in publications, to the extent where 96, 97% of our students will graduate with a publication.
Wow.
98, 99% of our students will have done research by the time they graduate from here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having said that, I should also be honest, 94 or whatever percent of our students, 95% come in having had research.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just self-fulfilling. But we do have it here. It's easy. Even if you're not sure what you want to do, just talk to someone and they'll say, you know what, you'd be great in my lab, or maybe you should come over here and spend some time with me.
Yeah.
And then we also have something called a scholarly concentration, which does require, it doesn't have to be research, but most people do either biological science research, social, public health. So they are, in some fashion doing research. It just doesn't have to be bench research.
Yeah. Just before we kind of wrap up the screening process a little bit, so you obviously you value research on the application?
We do, but we don't
require it, right? Okay. Any kind of general, when you're talking with undergraduates, say at a forum or a talk, is there any kind of general advice you give students that say, hey, I'm applying to Johns Hopkins next year, what should I know?
Well, number one, know that you don't have to do research.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you come here, 9 times out of 10, you will probably end up doing research. But it's something that you may initiate, and that's not something that we're going to force on you. And the reason why, we as screeners like to see research is because it usually is an indication of it, that active mind and that lifelong learner. Researchers are constantly learning and applying that to their research. Research doesn't end just because you get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
You have to keep going.
Yeah. What else? What else do you tell undergrads and say, hey, I'm applying next year?
Well, I tell them that if they're coming to Hopkins, know that we highly, highly value students who are willing to give of themselves to their communities. And because when our students come here, they get incredibly involved in all of Baltimore, but particularly in East Baltimore, where we're located, which has a large economically underserved population, and so our students do a lot in the community, and some of it involves interprofessional education as well, working with students from the School of Nursing, School of Public Health, even the University of Maryland's College of Pharmacy students can be involved.
So I know what I'm hearing here, but I want to make it obvious is that you're looking for undergraduates that maybe have a track record of this kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Service in the community, being involved in other populations and other people that are not much like themselves potentially. Because you're probably looking at, if they have a track record of this, they're likely going to bring it with them to Johns Hopkins.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So yes. I know you and I talk about this a lot, but that's why I want to make this clear. Like, we're looking for track records.
That's right. That's the whole point of the application.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It shouldn't be what I plan to do, but what I've done as well.
Yeah. Not these abstract thoughts and then just like, well, I'm going to do this. But
that's right. That's exactly right.
Talk the talk and walk the walk
that's right.
together.
Right.
So okay. So your screening committee pours through the applications. They make the decisions. You invite your students, you interview about 600 odd people a year.
That's right.
You get invited for the interview. What's walk us through the interview day. What can they expect when they come to your school on that interview day? What's it feel like?
Well, the first thing they can expect is the night before we have a greeters program where they have an opportunity to meet with current first year students. And we will tell the organizers, it's actually a running committee of students, who the interviewees are, and sometimes, and then they'll post it on a website with other first year students, and they'll say, oh, there's someone from Miami University, and they're not talking about Florida, they're talking about Miami University of Ohio, and we may have a student from there, so they'll say, gee, I'm going to go to the greeters program.
Yeah.
They'll see that there's someone from maybe not their college, but from their hometown or fairly close by. So they want to go to the greeters program. And what that does is establishes a connection and a comfort level for
Yeah.
the interviewee right from the beginning. And everything there is off the record. There's nothing official that will take place. It's just to welcome them and hear from the perspective of someone who recently went through the process and obviously succeeded in getting in and matriculating. So that's the night before. The day of the interview, we have a tour of the major campus residence called Reed Hall. Some of them may actually have stayed at Reed Hall Reed Hall's the old campus. Correction. 929 is what it's called. The address is 929 Wolf Street. So 929 is where they may stay. It's like a 23-story building, fairly close spot, and it looks like condos inside. Some of the students may also stay off campus with other students, or they may stay in a hotel. But there is a formal tour of 929 that morning. That's optional, obviously.
Is that Hopkins owned facility or like managed?
It is Hopkins managed. In some respects, it's also managed by a hotel corporation that helps build it. But I would say 99% of the students, if not all, or residents, are either Hopkins medical students or nursing students or graduate students.
Oh, that's great. So it's right by Armstrong.
It's a block. It's maybe 2 blocks from the campus, but within our perimeter. Not even 2 blocks from the campus.
Sounds great.
2 blocks from from our building. Let's put it that way. 3 blocks. And then beginning at 11 that morning, 11:15, they should make their way over to the Miller Research Building where my office is located. And we only interview 2 days a week, Thursdays and Fridays. And so they have an opportunity, they have to attend a mandatory orientation session, interview day orientation session, either with me or with our director of admissions, Valerie Mazza, who you may have met before. And I typically do Thursdays, and Mrs. Mazza does Fridays. And these are about 45 minutes, and I give an overview of, and not just, not the process, but I give them the highlights of curriculum, and then tell them what their day is going to be like and when they can expect to hear, and talk to them about updates. And then we're joined by someone from the financial aid office as well for about 15 minutes, and she usually gives a quick overview of aid as well. The aid process here as well. And then they go to a lunch in our conference room with faculty and students who volunteer to meet with them. And none of these folks are on the admissions committee, and it's all off the record. And that's followed by a 1-hour tour of the medical campus. But because we're such a broad or spread out campus, it's fairly limited to a couple of the key buildings.
It's big
hospitals that are right here, and the Armstrong Medical Education Building. And then
do you get to see the part with the dome?
Yes, they do. They do.
In fact,
they do go through the dome. That's part of our history, and there's a whole talk about the dome and grand rounds, how it developed there, and they show you what that meant.
That's cool.
So they do get to see the dome, absolutely, and they get to see the simulation centers as well, and then the education building, and they make their way back here, and then they have 2 interviews that begin at 2:00 and go to about 4:30, and we still do the traditional one-on-one interview. We do not do the multiple mini interview as some American institutions have begun to do, following the lead of the Canadian institutions over the last, I'd say, 17 years or so, or 15 years. We still do one-on-one, and one interview is always with a faculty member, and the other is with a medical student. And medical students are 4th years or rising 4th years, MD, PhD students, or MD students who are taking a year off for research, or MPH, and are trained and given unconscious bias training and so forth, as well as what to look for in the admissions process. And so the faculty interviews are anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and the student interviews are anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes.
Do applicants that are coming there, do they know ahead of time with whom they're going to be meeting with, or do you just tell them that day?
We tell them that afternoon. We don't even tell them that morning. They don't. find out until they return from the tour. And one of the reasons why we do this, Christian, is years ago I found that there were students who would Google their interviewers
I know.
and then talk to their interviewer about the interviewer's research, and then the
Yep.
interviewer would write about, wow, this person knew all about my research.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, yes, it's called the internet. Yeah. So
I know. Same thing. And why can't we find out beforehand? I'm like, because you're going to spend so much time they're here to meet you. You don't
that's
have
exactly
to
right.
interview
Don't waste
them.
your time. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And don't flatter them, and because some,
Yeah. And then we
I love
found
these
like,
guys, but yeah.
you run into this, like there's probably sometimes there are like last minute switches because a clinical faculty may have an emergency that like, I can't come. I just had
Okay.
So-
I run into it every interview day.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I'm rarely on the schedule, because I'm the one they plug in for last minute interviews. Now I do some scheduled interviews,
Mhm.
but I will also plug myself in.
I'm
if
the same.
someone-
I'm the pinch
Yep.
hitter. And
That's
so
right.
these kids that would spend, time Googling their interviewer, and then we're like, oh, by the way, Dr. Johnson's not going to be able to be here because she had an emergency. Then they freak out because now they don't know anything about their new interview.
That's right.
Just
Right.
added
So-
stress.
So it levels the playing field.
Yeah, it was just too much added stress. So
That's right.
that's why we don't do that.
Right. Yeah, we don't do it. And that's fine with me. One of the things I tell them is when they can expect to hear from us.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we, unlike some other institutions, we don't want to see updates, 5 minutes after you've applied.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's partly because you don't know when we evaluated your application, screened your application. And if it's been screened and then you send in an update of, 3 weeks after it's been reviewed, I can't ask someone to re-review your application.
Yeah.
So instead, what we do is tell them on interview day, if they're invited to interview, of course, and this helps, cut down on the number of publications and so forth we see. But I tell them after the interview day, you're free to send in anything you'd like, including updates, including new materials, including new recommendations. So I think that's one way they can try to further their case. But frankly, my philosophy is if you've already gotten an interview and you've gotten this far, we're already very interested in you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, unless they submitted in June and they're being interviewed in January and something significant happened in between, you're right. We usually have enough information to make a decision.
Right. But not, yes. And even if they did submit it in June and I don't interview them until January, I don't want the update until after January.
Yeah. What about, what kind of access does the faculty interviewer have to the application? They see the whole 9 yards, or they see limited information?
No, they get everything from soup to nuts, so to speak. And, we don't say you have to read every single page, but we do ask that they be familiar with the application so that they can obviously conduct a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of the training that's done annually, we tell them, we give them a list of suggested questions, definite things they can't discuss.
Yep.
And then there are 2 questions that every interviewer is asked to make. And what's interesting is the 2 that the faculty ask can and usually are similar to the 2 asked by the medical students, and yet some of the interviewees will just go with it. Others will say, well, I've already been asked that question. That tells us something too when they say that, so we're interested in how they are reacting and why they are reacting a certain way. And I've had interviewees, fire the question right back at me, which I have always been a little taken aback by.
Interesting.
Because I'm not the one applying.
Right.
So,
yeah.
but so it's our process is really to look for the outliers. But when I was at the other institution several years ago, I had a committee member say, well, everyone who we interview is essentially accepted. That's not true at all.
No. Yeah.
It just means we're interested.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then how about access for the medical students? What do they see?
They are given the entire application, but depending on the year, I swear, sometimes the students will say, the medical students will say, we only want to read their personal statement. And
Oh,
then we'll look at the entire application after they have conducted the interview, and
okay.
then see how that compares to the rest of the application. However they do it, that's fine as long as they're consistent as a group. We
Hmm.
have about 20 medical students on our committee.
Oh, so every year they kind of work with your office and say, "Hey, this year we've decided we would like to see the whole thing," or does
That's right. And we just need a heads up. That's right.
Yeah, and then you can make that access available in
Absolutely, because it's all
databases.
done electronically.
Yep. Okay. All right. So if somebody's coming to interview at Hopkins, and do you have any kind of general interview day tips or advice for them that you would just say, hey, just keep this in mind when you're coming here?
Yeah, well, I think it's no different from any other place, which is number one, if we've invited you for an interview, that means we're really interested in you.
Mm-hmm.
So we want you to be yourself and don't try to be someone that we didn't read about, because if that's the case, then we're going to comment on this doesn't seem to be the same person.
Mm-hmm.
The same characteristics aren't coming through, and we can't understand why. And sometimes we realize it's a result of being puffed up
Yeah.
by the recommenders. Maybe it's not their fault,
Yeah.
but we want them to be as themselves as much as possible. And it's easy for me to say, but I really want them. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is they need to relax. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, be familiar with their application. Number three, know their application, and so that nothing is a surprise to them, because anything we ask them that's in their application is fair game to discuss.
Yeah, I I sometimes hear that during the interview cycle. I'll be interviewing somebody. So I may have said this in my secondary. I don't know, but then they go on. I'm like, well, you should know this.
Right,
You
exactly.
wrote it. You know?
Read it the day or two before, but
Yeah.
definitely read it, reread
Go
it.
back through if you're going to interview at a school, go back and read what you wrote, so that way you can say, I
Right.
spoke about this in my application. I'm going to expand on it now, or allude to it.
And the other thing I would say, Christian, is don't look at it as I'm competing with a spot with someone else who's here on interview day,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't think of it that way.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we're looking at the individual, period.
Yeah, I see some applicants sometimes trying to size up everybody in the room.
Right.
Some groups are really quiet and they won't talk to each other, and other groups they might as well be like best friends their whole lives.
Right.
And they're super chatty, and so it's interesting the different dynamics that come out of these interview day groups.
Uh-huh.
Do they see you? Are you at every interview day for the most part, unless you're out of town?
Just the Thursdays.
Okay.
And occasionally I'll switch it up, but they oftentimes don't know who I am. They see me in the office, and that's perfectly fine with me, but because I run the admissions office and the process, and that's one of the reasons why I interview, so I know what's going on out there and what my committee members are experiencing. So if we need to tweak things, which we certainly have to do from time to time, we'll do it. But we try to make sure it's not going to change or mess up the entire year,
Yeah.
But if I think something is just not going right with our process, I'm like, oh, you're absolutely right. We're not giving the students enough time, or the interviewers enough time, but we usually do. I mean, most interviewers only have 3 interviews at the max here. So, and that's between 2 and 5, really.
Yeah.
And I try to only schedule myself for 2 interviews. Occasionally, I've done 4. Years ago, I remember doing 6 in one day, and that's no
exhausting.
fun. Well, that was because of a hurricane. We had a hurricane one year. We had a snowstorm one year, and people say, "Are you still open?" Yeah, because the students are here.
Yeah,
the night before. Right. So I mean, everyone else goes home, not admissions.
Yeah, that's right. We're essential staff. Report.
That's right. We're essential staff, and the process must continue.
Yep. So the interview day wraps up, and then it comes to the admissions committee piece. So the admissions committee meets and they start talking about these candidates.
No, there's a step before that.
Oh, okay.
Everyone, we do documentation of the interview.
Okay.
And so everyone gets all the faculty, at least, we all dictate our notes, our interview notes. And then we have that professionally done.
Really?
On the
Wow.
phones, yes. And then they send them back to Valerie, and Valerie then sends them to the interviewer. I always want to see what I wrote. I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't make sense, or
Yeah.
this, what language was that?
Uh-huh.
And occasionally, even though the interviewer, the dictation folks are pretty good, they'll write something, and I'm like, that is not what I said. That's not the
Mhm.
word, or that's they misspell something like ophthalmology, which is
Yeah.
understandable because of the various ages and so forth, and I'll just correct those things. I try to stay away from technical terms, number one, because I'm not a physician or scientist,
Mhm.
and nor are they, and I don't want to confuse them. So when I talk about someone's research, I put it in plain English.
Yeah.
And number two, um, these have to be somewhat concise reports, and there are certain things that we ask every interviewer to touch upon in their interview report, so that everyone is familiar in terms of the format and look for those things. Okay,
Yeah.
so there is some consistency in how our interview reports look, and there's a reason for that.
Mhm.
Number two, the reason is because after everyone has interviewed in a certain cohort, meaning 3 Thursdays in a row or 4 Thursdays or whatever, they are then presented before the associated admissions committee meeting. We break the group into the admissions committee into two separate groups, and so the Thursday
Oh.
people meet as the Thursday committee, the
Okay.
Friday people meet as the Friday committee. So everyone on Thursday committee is then sent not only the interview report, the dictation, but the entire application. They're asked to give a preliminary score on a scale of 1 to 5, meaning 1, absolutely, we think this person should be here. 2, we think they're terrific. We're not sure, but let's discuss it more. 3, we definitely may need discussion on this. 4, medical school, yes. Here, not necessarily.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
5, not even sure about medical school.
Okay. So then that's the associate admissions committee, the Thursday Friday group.
Mm-hmm.
And then is there an overarching group then that makes
No,
looks at the
no. And then
ones?
what happens is that's the preliminary vote. That's all done
Oh,
electronically.
okay. Okay.
And then we actually meet.
I'll say, okay, I see.
The
Okay.
Thursday group will then meet about 10 days after that distribution, or 12 days usually, after the notes have been distributed to the entire committee and the file has been distributed to the entire committee. And we will meet over dinner, which
Mhm.
we provide from 5 to 7:30, 5 to 8, and discuss the students with the most compelling scores first.
Mhm.
And the presenters are the individuals who interviewed. So every interviewer gets 2 minutes, 2 minutes, because
You could go on and
ostensibly
be
everyone
there
has
all
already read
night.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we could go on all night too, but it's to cut, to make sure we don't do that. But also it's because we want them to highlight, don't regurgitate what we've already written or read, and
Mhm.
comes to report. What are some of the highlights, and particularly for those people who know what that group looks like, how does this person stand out? Some of the conversations are less than a minute, and then there's discussion. I mean, some of the presentations are less than a minute. Then there's discussion, and I would say with the people with less than a minute, there's hardly any discussion at all. It's when we get to slightly higher scores, meaning a little lower down the list, where the discussion gets lengthier, and it can get a little heated sometimes in that
Mhm.
room.
Mhm.
So we keep it pretty cold for that
Yeah.
reason. And then at the end of the evening, no one knows what's happening. And by the way, everyone votes anonymously. We use clickers, eye clickers,
Yeah.
and so it protects the anonymity of the committee member. But then we compile the scores, and we do an aggregate of all the different committee meetings to see who has the best scores and the lowest score, and we send out our acceptances 3 times. mid-December, end of January, beginning of February, and end of March, beginning of April.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's one final batch there, right there at the end of March, beginning of
Yeah,
April.
that's the final batch. And yet those people are just as um, likely to be admitted as people who were admitted in the first batch.
Mm-hmm.
They are given the same opportunity at the associated meetings as people who were interviewed in August.
Paul, is there anything that you find the admissions committee members really get excited about? Is there just something about an applicant that kind of is there anything come to mind?
That's a tough question and a good question, Christian, but that is the tough question. I'd have to give that some thought because, obviously I've been here a long time. The committee dynamics have changed from year to year to year. We have some members who get who think, they have to have great MCAT scores and GPAs. Some who care about their clinical experiences. Some who care not just about the research, but have they published or their publication. But that doesn't necessarily define the entire committee. I'm talking about individuals.
Yeah.
So,
and that's how we have a committee.
Yeah, it's a committee.
Yeah.
It's a committee. That's right. It's a committee. And occasionally they look to me because of my experiences, both at the medical school level and at the undergraduate level, to they may not understand the institution, the undergraduate institution from which that person has applied. And I will sometimes share with them how selective that institution is, how rigorous it is, that there's no grade inflation or a lot of grade inflation based on my experience. I will sometimes talk about even their SATs that we've seen from students who go into those schools. And not to say that you can't be any different coming out of there. In fact, we will take students from schools you've never heard of because we were like, oh, this is interesting. And you know what? This person has had a great exposure to medicine, or their institution may be small and had limited opportunities for them. And yet that's the person who did the intramural training program at the NIH for a year or 2 years. So obviously they found out somehow that this is the kind of world they want to be in, and they've made that work for them, and that excites the committee. I will say that. Yeah,
I'm glad you said that, because I know I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, have heard from students that say, I am from this really small college in a rural part of the state, pick a state, and they, like, well, how can I be competitive at your school? And I tell them, like, if you do what you're supposed to do and get good grades and do well in the MCAT, and you'll bubble up. Like, we'll find you.
Right. Well, Kristen, I mean, we talk about this term all the time now in medical school, and we did when I did undergraduate admissions, but it is so true. It really is a holistic approach.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be one stop shopping or one, size fits all type of selection process. It really isn't. It truly isn't. I have to say, in all my years, there's room for all kinds of students here who are great students, good students, or students who may have started with had a rough start and then caught on in some way, or their lives stabilized, and all of a sudden you see someone who's like doing remarkably well, may have taken a gap year. That's something I haven't talked about, but they may have taken a year off to learn more, to get stronger, or to find out more about their interest in clinical medicine. I just talked to someone yesterday. He's 29 years old and he'll be applying to medical school. And he thought, well, am I too old? I'm like, for what?
Yeah. Yeah. So you also not advocate, but you support gap years as long as somebody's doing something meaningful and bettering their application or themselves.
Well, that should be, there should be a couple of reasons to take a gap year. One is, and it depends on what the holes are, if there's a hole in their clinical exposure, then get that. And that's why you may have to take a gap year. And it may be more than a gap year. If you're truly someone who wasn't interested in medicine and majored in a non-science and didn't take any of the prerequisites, then do a post-bac, and that could be a formal one or an informal one. If you're someone who had a rather rocky first couple of years, and you need, you did better your junior year and senior year, then do something academically connected to show that that wasn't just a fluke, but that you've continued to achieve academically.
Yeah. So when somebody needs that academic redemption, which I think what you're referring to is maybe one of those special master's programs or a master. How does the committee review that? I mean, obviously you look at the undergraduate record, you look at the graduate. How do you weigh those? Is there is like a mental weight put in there?
No. In fact, I just, that was just a question in our secondary email account that how much do you weigh a master's program? We don't weigh anything here. That's the beauty of it. Everything is fair game for discussion and for evaluation. Do we want to see an upward trend? Yes. We also like to see consistency, so that's, showing that all of a sudden you can go from a B-C student to an A student is no more impressive, although that's impressive, than someone who was always an A student. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there are people who think they're going to be at a disadvantage, which just stuns me. They'll say, well, am I disadvantaged because I didn't do a gap year? I didn't do X, Y, Z. I don't have a master's. No. We're looking at you. I'm not going to compare you to someone else whose trajectory was completely different. But I want to see what you did in terms of your own record, and if that needed addressing, and you did it, great.
I'm glad you said that. I think that's important for students to hear, because I know there's a lot of.
It's real. It's true.
It's real. Yeah, there's a lot of mixed information out there.
I know that, and that's what probably scares me more than anything, frankly.
So what if an applicant is waitlisted? So they come to interview and they're not accepted right off the bat and they're waitlisted. How do they demonstrate their interest in saying, "Hey, Hopkins is my place"?
Well, some students say, "Well, should I send an update now?" And you can send that. You could have sent that the day you got home after your interview. We go. Unlike some places, we go strictly by the committee's final score when they discuss, so that we don't have to go back and revisit it with the entire committee. And so we don't want to be influenced because someone says, for instance, they'll say, I'd like to send in a letter of intent or a letter of interest. You can do that, but we're not going to do anything with it. I don't look at them. The committee never sees them.
Because you're just going down the rank order.
We just go by the rank order. Now, it's for those people who, we give them, you're told you're waitlisted, and then later in April, second week of April, all waitlist people are sent a follow-up saying, are you still interested? If so, please click on this link that will indicate that, yes, I'm still interested. They're not committing to us because they haven't been accepted, number one. And they can still, as we both know, plan to enroll somewhere else. That's fine.
Yeah.
As long as they don't commit to enroll somewhere, I'll make them an offer if I get to their name.
That's good to know. I think it's important for people to hear. So for those that are accepted, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the curricular highlights of your curriculum. So they get accepted. I mean, I saw from your statistics that the vast majority of students that are coming to Johns Hopkins are from outside of the state of Maryland.
Yes. So, in fact, the number from within Maryland is pretty small.
Yeah. So I've got to schlep all my stuff and get to Baltimore, and I get set up in 929 or wherever I'm staying.
Or wherever, right.
And then I show up. What are those first few days and weeks like there as a medical student at Johns Hopkins? Like,
first of all, we have
things and
we have a 3-day orientation in August. Followed by we have these intersession or time courses that deal with topics in medicine, and the very first one relates to disparities, health disparities. Our whole curriculum looks at the social determinants of disease. So that course, very first course, is on health disparities. We want you to learn about that. So that'll be the first course you have. Topics in interdisciplinary medicine is what we call it. And then you'll have, later on, you'll have other courses. These are 1-week courses. You'll have one on obesity, nutrition, and behavior changes. You'll have one on disaster medicine,
Mm.
informatics, and digital health, pain care. But the first 2 years of our curriculum are called the scientific foundations of medicine. So it's looking at the science of medicine. The last 2 years we call the foundations of clinical medicine. Okay.
Okay.
So your first 2 years, though, you'll be dealing, and we essentially call the course Genes to Society, and that brings in it's system based, and it looks at genetics, biology, and physiology of each organ system.
So kind of a lot of longitudinal themes there, it sounds like.
Right, exactly, definitely. And then we have, and starting in January, I believe, something called the longitudinal ambulatory clerkship, which is just 1/2 day a week, but it gets you out into the community and to working with physicians, faculty, preceptors, and patients.
Is that kind of the first introduction when students, because students always ask, when can I start to see patients at your school? Is that kind of the first real time? Are they being ramped up in the first few months and getting in like clinical diagnoses training and things like that? And then that's the first exposure, or does that happen earlier?
I mean, we talk about them having patient contact from day one.
Okay.
And some of that is standardized patients, but learning how to do physical exams, histories, taking histories, and so forth. Yeah, so that is true. That starts right after orientation.
Yeah. So what's a typical week like as a first year, second year student? What's kind of a typical week for students there?
Well, they have the scientific foundation courses, so they may be pathophysiology, biochemistry. So they're going to courses, anatomy, and so forth during the day, and then they're either in labs occasionally, or not occasionally. They're in labs, but some of the students do volunteer work in the community. They are student-run clinics. There's a center for teaching English as a second language close by a few blocks from our East Baltimore campus in Fells Point. So, and then they're studying. I mean, one of the things, and it's the same everywhere, is that the study of medicine is learning how to process a lot of information in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What time do classes begin in the morning? 8:30?
I would say 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Let's see. I actually have a copy of. No, I don't have the times there. But I will say it's got to be around 8, because I always see students. I get here about 7:45, 7:50 every morning, and I park fairly close to 929, and so I see like a hordes of students heading over to the Armstrong Medical Education Building.
Yeah. And what time do they kind of wrap up for the day? Coursework.
Early afternoon.
Yeah. When you are meeting with people that say that they want to learn more about your medical school, what are some things you like them to know about the curriculum or about the coursework the students take? Is there like some takeaway messages or like some highlights that you have to get out to them?
That the curriculum here is not static. This is not the same curriculum that their relative or friend of the family may have had at Hopkins or any other medical school 20 years ago. And we changed our curriculum 10 years ago because medical care changed. Mm-hmm. And so we're reflecting on that. That's why we called the social determinants of medicine. It's much more interwoven with interprofessional education, with social science, with public health, ethics. That's all part of our curriculum now. Mm-hmm. And so if they think they're just going to come here and learn biology, they're going to be mistaken.
I saw that you have some interest. I felt they were interesting joint degree or dual degree programs, and like the history of medicine is one that I saw.
Yeah, that's one of them. That's right. There's a history of medicine. There's informatics.
Oh yeah.
There is education.
Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah. So
what's interesting about that is, I don't know how long they've been doing that, but one of the things I find interesting about Hopkins, so many of our graduates go into academic medicine. I think nationally, for the class of 2018, it was about 25%. At Hopkins, it was over 40%.
Wow.
over a certain period of time from 2003 to 2004 until we're between 2003 and 2018, let's say, 40% of our graduates have gone into academic medicine.
Yeah.
So they're still seeing patients, but they're teaching at universities like Hopkins, medical institutions like
That's great.
Yeah.
What percentage of your students would you say do these really interesting dual degree programs? Roughly.
Roughly, I think it's got to be about 20%.
Yeah.
Because a fair number do the MPH. We've got the
the Bloomberg.
world, preeminent schools of public health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health. It's not a joint degree in the sense that you apply for the MD and MPH at the same time, but it is something you apply for after year 3. And I think with one exception, everyone in the last 20 years who applied has been accepted, so from our MD program. And they will only take you into our School of Public Health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, if you've had at least 2 years either as a medical personnel or working for an NGO or 2 years in medical school.
Wow.
So you cannot go directly into the MPH from college. So that does differ a little from other places. The other joint degree programs, there are a small number who are doing them, but they are opportunities that they can pursue here. Plus, if they're interested in going elsewhere for a dual degree, that's fine too. Hopkins has always been about giving people options and adding to their education because we think it enriches the experience that they have, and so we realize those experiences don't have to be limited to us.
Absolutely. Well, everybody always asks us, how do students prepare for boards? Is there time carved out for?
There is time carved out, about 6 weeks.
6 weeks. That's enough.
That's plenty of time. But you know what, Christian, if someone needs more than that, they can, I won't say petition, but certainly make it known to the Dean of Students' office they need more time. Now, one of the things we did here when we changed the curriculum also, a term that was starting to come about when I was there the first go-round was learning communities. And I don't know if you have those at Case, but we have them at Minnesota. Here we call them the colleges. And those students are assigned to 4 colleges. They have nothing to do with their eventual interest. It's just to balance the class of 120. There are 30 in each college. And so you have horizontal strands and lateral strands, so to speak, in terms of the upper class students who serve as mentors. But you also have faculty who are practicing physicians who each have a group of students who they stay with for all 4 years as their advisors.
That's nice.
To help them out. So there's a lot of advice here. We're not just throwing you to the wolves. Come here. I think one of the best things about coming to Hopkins is learning medicine from people who truly know medicine.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so just kind of quickly, 3rd and 4th year kind of generally structured. 3rd year doing clinical rotations?
3rd years, they do required rotations in the 3rd year here. And then they can do the electives. The required rotations have to be under tutelage of a Hopkins faculty member. And the electives certainly can be here. We have 2 huge hospitals that are relatively new. They were finished in 2012, dedicated in 2012. And then we have our Bayview campus and affiliations with numerous hospitals throughout Baltimore. And then we own outright 4 other hospitals, one in suburban Baltimore in Howard County, one in Bethesda, Maryland, right up the street from the NIH called Suburban Hospital, and then one in Northwest DC called Sibley Hospital, and then one in St. Petersburg, Florida, not Russia, called All Children's, and that is the one where they can actually do a number of their rotations because that is online for residency. So you really need to have residents in place. The others will probably get there, but All Children's is there, and so you can do any number of
that's interesting.
So, right, and it doesn't just have to be peds, obviously.
Oh, wow.
Right, so, and then we allow our students to go anywhere in the U.S. for their elective rotations or abroad. 36% or more of our students will have a global experience by the time.
I was gonna. One thing I want to ask before I ask about global things. Do students need a car?
Yes, they do. And it's not just during the clinical years. You remember I mentioned that they have the longitudinal ambulatory clerkship beginning in January of their first year. So it can be helpful
Yeah.
to
Makes your
have a
life
car even in
easier.
the first year. I would say by the third and fourth year,
Yeah.
it is very important. Now we do offer. We're currently offering our students who may be doing rotations, who don't have a car, and they're there. You get out late at night. We have an agreement with one of the card writing apps,
Oh,
to take the students home.
well,
And,
that's
and they
nice.
don't have to pay.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Uh,
that's great.
right,
Yeah, I know, because we get that question too. And it's like, well, we can't require a car like general chemistry and biochemistry,
right, right. We don't require it, right.
but it will make your life easier.
That's exactly right.
Especially when it gets to clinical rotations and especially third year where sleep is a priority and you get out late, you're going to want to go to bed, not
That's right. That's
try to
right.
figure out which bus to get on and be on a bus for an hour or
Well,
whatever.
and they don't even have to do that. They just call up, they get the app out, and
Oh, that's really
pick
cool.
them up.
Okay, so the global opportunities, I saw that too. A large percentage of, a seemingly large percentage of your students are going somewhere overseas. Does Hopkins have a special relationship with certain places that students
Yes, we have
tend to go to?
formal agreements in a number of countries, Uganda and so forth, around the globe. But even beyond that, if there's a country where we don't have a formal agreement, as long as there's a teaching hospital, so we can be assured that someone's going to oversee you and can record, your experiences, you're certainly free to go. I mean, we just have to get some information about it, so that our students are able to get these great experiences by going abroad. Sometimes it's just to observe how medicine is done in another country. Sometimes it's to learn another language and volunteer. But but the electives, as I mentioned, don't have to be here. They can be anywhere. And then these sort of co-curricular experiences are what they can do abroad as well.
Just to kind of start to wind this down here about the curriculum, what do you hear from students that are going to medical school that they like about Hopkins? Do you hear like some common themes from time to time for students? Oh, I love this place because
Well, they love the teaching. They really do. They love the teaching here. It's incredible to see such outstanding, highly regarded faculty who commit so much of their time to actual teaching. They're not researchers. Some of them are, but they're actually working with you and teaching you, in the first 2 years and in the last 2 years. Now obviously you're talking about different types of people. In the first 2 years, you're talking about basic scientists and so forth. In the last 2 years, you're talking about clinical folks, but you're still going to learn from them. And I think that's one of the benefits from coming here. The other thing is, no one's going to shoehole you into a certain area of medicine. So our students, if someone comes here and thinks, well, they only go into research, or they're not going to do anything with primary care, they're mistaken. We have a primary care leadership track here.
I saw that, yeah.
And that's been around, now I guess this is the 5th or 6th year. And each year it has increased in enrollment, and it's selective. The next cohort, in fact, will be announced on Monday. I'll be going to their dinner Monday night. And while we have a lot of students going into disciplines like surgery and psychiatry specialties, I guess, we also have a lot going into internal medicine and pediatrics. We don't have a family medicine department. We have a number of students going into family medicine.
Oh, that's interesting.
So we think we can prepare you for any area of medicine.
Yeah. Last question about Johns Hopkins before we switch gears and talk about personal statements. Is there anything coming in the future at your school that you'd like to talk about? Any changes coming down the road, or anything that's special?
I don't know if it's a change or if it's a different approach to medicine, but our vice dean has talked about precision education. Now, you hear the term precision medicine, but the vice dean has talked about the vice dean for education has talked about precision education, and I can't say I'm entirely sure what that means, but it sounds interesting.
It does.
And I wonder if that means taking someone and their strengths and applying it to particular areas and fields. So that's what I assume that's what he means by precision education. I'll probably get chewed out later on if I'm way off the mark. But I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Education.
Yeah. Cool. Well, is there anything else we haven't unpacked about the medical school, Paul, or do you want to switch over and talk about personal statement things?
Oh, let's switch over and talk about personal statements.
All right. So we're not doing listener questions today. Paul and I talked, and we want to dispel some of the myths and things about personal statements. And I know this causes a lot of angst among some applicants, and I think it's because it can be difficult to write. But it's one part of a really large application, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, it gets back to holistic.
Yeah.
I mean, you can write the best application in the world, but if the rest of your applications, best personal statement in the world, but if the rest of your application stinks, you just have a good essay.
Yeah. Let me read the prompt. I printed out the prompt here before we got on this call.
Okay, sure.
So this is directly from AMCAS. So I thought it'd be important just to give context to anybody's listening to this has not applied before. This is what the personal statement prompt is in the application. The directions say, use the personal comments essay as an opportunity to distinguish yourself from other applicants. Consider and write your personal comments essay carefully. Many admissions committees place significant weight on the essay. Here are some questions you may want to consider while writing the essay. 1, why have you selected the field of medicine? That's an important one. 2, what motivates you to learn more about medicine? 3, what do you want medical schools to know about you that hasn't been disclosed in other sections of the application? And then there's additional ones. In addition, you may want to include information such as unique hardships, challenges, or obstacles that may have influenced your educational pursuits, or comments on significant fluctuations in your academic record that are not explained elsewhere in your application. So
I'll start with that last one first.
Yeah.
I can leave that out. Okay.
Yeah.
You know why? Because that's something you can discuss if you get to the interview.
Right.
But you don't want to draw too much attention to that. We're going to see it anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. And sometimes students misperceive what they feel grade fluctuation is like. They got a B+ in organic chemistry.
That's right.
And I got to spend a paragraph talking about that in my personal statement.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, Christian, I was recently at a fair. I don't do many fairs, but they asked me to come early because they give the attendees the opportunity to meet with their students. This is at the University of Maryland College Park, where Wendy Laughlin is the director of college counseling, and is just one of the great ones, and has a terrific staff as well. But one of the, last year I did the interview session with, and they're one-on-one. So, and I that was actually interesting. This year, instead of an interview, mock interview, this year I wanted to do the personal statement, and I enjoyed it because the young man wrote just wonderfully well and clear and to the point. But what he lacked was addressing that very first question: what brings you to medicine? To that until well into the second page. Now, keep in mind, this was double spaced, and not the way one would have it on the AMCAS application. But what I told him was, if it took him that long to talk about why medicine, you're going to lose your screener, your reviewer.
Yeah.
I'm looking for why medicine first and foremost. I'm looking for what his experience, her experience has been up to this point that makes them feel that, they've got to go into medicine. This is how, they enjoy working with people. They've enjoyed what they've observed, done, that's medically related, but I've got to find that somewhere. I didn't see that anywhere. And I shared this with the young man, and he thought about it. He said, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I said, if we don't get that, if you don't hook us, so to speak, in the first few minutes, the first paragraph of your personal statement, you risk us not wanting to read any further. Meaning, I literally have read a couple 100,000 applications.
Yeah, you have.
Over the long time I've been doing not just medical school admissions, but undergrad as well, and also for ETS, for National Merit, for all these different scholarship services that I serve on. And I want to get a sense of why from whatever the question is,
Mm-hmm.
in the first few paragraphs, first few sentences of the paragraph. I don't want to have to dig too deep and realize I'm still not getting why this person wants to be a doctor. If I have to do that, then I
Yeah.
may elect to move on.
Yeah, it's got to be easy. And this sounds, I'm putting up air quotes. It has to be easy to read.
Yeah,
Not
it is
get,
for me by now. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it has to, because we're reading literally thousands of these during
Hmm.
the day, at night, in the airport, on the couch, at the desk, like it,
Hmm.
and trying to get them through them as thoughtfully and efficiently as we can. And
Hmm.
I mean, I maybe you could disagree with this, but when somebody doesn't know where to start, I'll say maybe start with like 2 or 3 themes
Hmm.
to that describe how you've been influenced to go into medicine.
That's right.
Just
No,
give you
I
a
think
place
that's a great way to approach it.
just to kind of give you a place to start, and then as you draft and redraft, maybe you can meld into something else. But
Hmm.
um,
But and the other thing though, and it's not just a personal statement; it's the entire application. Sometimes people don't know where to start and what to write.
mm-hmm,
Write what you know,
mm-hmm,
and not what you think we are looking for.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think I hear this often that students will come in and say, "Will you read my personal statement?" I say, "Oh, okay, I'll take a look." And then so I know I was told I have to have a catchy first sentence.
Mm.
And so I think sometimes people take that over the top a little bit.
Yes, right.
What
Yeah.
do you think? Do you think students need to have, like you said, a hook earlier? Do you think they need to have a catchy first few sentences to hook you in, or is it
No,
just
not to,
need to be to the point?
when I say hook, it has to be something of interest that shows me, hey, this person sort of knows what they're talking about. If
Mm-hmm.
they're all over the map and they're talking about um, how they were been a member of the football team or she was on the staff of the newspaper and everyone said, well, what do you want to be? And I realize I'm good with people. What does that have to do with patients though?
Yeah. Yeah.
Medicine.
Yep. I, I've said to people, and don't get too abstract. Or if you're
Right,
gonna, if you
right. That's right.
just give us like these abstract thoughts, you need to back it up with some citations. If you're going to say physicians have to be the best communicators because they have to do blah 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 blah, then what have you done to hone your communication skills
Mhm.
in the what that was through one of your experiences in working with a population in your community where you had to learn how to you're giving outreach information to medical information to people, discharge instructions and stuff like
Mhm.
that. I mean, cite examples
Right.
of
Well,
things.
I think one thing that surprises people, at least for us, we require two of your humanities, social and/or behavioral sciences to have been writing intensive. Well, why is that? Because we want to know that you can communicate. We want to know, and that's not just written communication, but also verbal communication.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know that you can be concise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
What you said this right up when we said that we're going to talk about personal statements. You said, a great personal statement doesn't necessarily get you like the interview. I mean, you have to have,
That's right. That's right.
so it can be a Pulitzer Prize winning personal statement and bring you to tears,
Mhm.
but it doesn't guarantee an interview, right?
That's right. It doesn't.
But a poorly
It,
written
it
one
just
or two
means
versions
you're a good writer. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. People always ask us, you probably get this too. Is there a personal statement that you'll always remember?
Um, it's funny because there's one in particular from undergrad that I remember that literally had to be about from my earliest career in undergrad admissions, and I won't go into that.
Uh-huh.
From the medical school side, you know, we're not looking for doom and gloom necessarily, but when someone does talk about their own experience and why medicine, um, they're revealing themselves, and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen some of the most, without going into any exact quotes or anything. I've seen people talk about things that have affected them, and yet they're able to go beyond themselves. Someone who, for instance, who realizes no matter how hard his life or her life has been, there's still of greater they've had more advantages than some others. The fact that they've been able to go to college, the fact that they're applying to medical school, and how they want to turn that around. So I guess there are certain themes that I think
Mm-hmm.
have resonated with me, and maybe that says something more about me. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. How do you know when you like a personal statement? Like, when you read it and you kind of, I like that. Like, what is there a feeling like, what makes you feel like that?
Um, that's a great question. There are times when I've read a personal statement and I'm like, oh, I want to meet this person.
Yeah.
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 It's not always a smile. It's just that, wow, I want to meet this person.
Mm-hmm.
If someone who can think like this, and not everyone can,
Mm-hmm.
but there are times when I just say, this is someone I want to talk to. I want to have a conversation with.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying, and I think what you're saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they somehow have captured their writing voice.
Yes, there you go.
And you feel like they're talking
their
to you.
writing voice. They've captured their personality.
Yes. Yeah. And that's hard to do.
It is. It's very hard to do. But see, here's the other thing, though. Sometimes that personal statement and what that voice is captured by their letter writers.
Mm-hmm.
Or cited by their letter writers, and they'll say, this is XYZ. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how they came through.
Mm-hmm.
In their essay. And that's when you say, all right, this is someone we've got to interview.
And
then the interviewer says, wow, I wasn't expecting them, because you have a lot of opportunity to write and rewrite those personal statements.
Yeah.
Yet they come in, and that's exactly who they are.
Yeah. I think this is a good piece of advice then to people, maybe, is that when you're drafting this, you don't want to, give it to 25 or 50 people to edit and review, but you have a select group of people you want to give it to and say, what do you does this sound like me?
Oh yeah, does this
that
is
like
probably
me?
the most important thing. Does this sound like me?
Yeah. Do you understand what I'm trying to express? Do you feel the fire in my belly that I want to go into medicine?
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a clue. Hopefully people are being honest with you, because sometimes if you give it to your parents, they might say, oh, this is great, but they don't want to say.
No, I wouldn't give it to my parents necessarily, but I would to a very close friend who because sometimes we're completely ourselves around our friends in ways that we aren't around our family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to say you're not yourself, or hopefully you are with your family. It's just that your friends have a different dynamic with you.
Something you mentioned a couple minutes ago is that you're often you appreciate somebody's telling their life story that have overcome some challenges and appreciation of the. And I think one thing to point out is not everybody has those hardships or those challenges.
No, that's right.
But if you do write about something that's kind of could potentially be emotional, you got to know that that's fair game to talk about in an interview.
Oh, for sure.
You don't have to bare your soul to us.
No,
because that topic could come up in the interview, and if it's sensitive and you feel like you might have it, I've had some people sometimes, get a little emotional and
we had an interviewer at my former institution who asked a young man what brought him to medicine, and the young man started to describe a situation, an illness by one of the parents, and then just broke down into tears, put his head on the desk of the interviewer. And then the interviewer looked at his personal statement again, and then looked at another part of the application and said, but your parent is still alive. I think it's yes, but it really hurt my family and just caused disruption. Well, this person clearly wasn't at the point where they could talk to a patient in year one about something,
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that's a perfect example of you're in an interview situation. You're already going to be you're going to be nervous.
Right.
And then this sensitive topic could come up, and you're not kind of prepared yet to kind of talk about it in a way that feels comfortable. And then the next thing you know, you've started to get emotional, which is fine. That happens. But I mean,
oh, sure, it does.
But it's not it's not the situation you probably planned for.
Right. So, and you don't want to be embarrassed by something they did in the interview.
Yep.
Or in their personal statement.
Yeah.
If you find it embarrassing to write about, then I may find it embarrassing to read. So leave it out of there.
Yeah, TMI sometimes.
That's right.
I think
I have seen things that I thought, I wish you hadn't.
Yep, I think that's where when I was asking about like, do you need a fancy, fancy schmancy hook to bring people in? And that's where I
No,
think
not
sometimes
like
we go over
that.
the top and they get TMI and
You don't need something to. You don't want to. I mean, the idea that you have to shock your reader is just that's fine for fiction, but you don't need that for the
right.
personal
Yeah,
statement.
this is not a novel. And
This is not a novel. That's right.
sometimes we're reading these while I'm eating lunch. And I don't need to read about green pus coming out and like, I get it. Like you're in an ER and you saw an abscess, but I don't need to read the gory details.
Right. Well, I'd rather not. Yeah.
What other kind of tips when you're giving a talk about personal statements? Are there things that you like people to kind of keep in mind?
I want to make sure there's a conclusion, frankly.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get to the bottom of it and think, okay, I was expecting something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So tie it up.
Tie it up.
Wrap it up.
Right. Tie it together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why we want them to have had a writing intensive courses where they'll learn, hopefully, to be a writer and to work on their writing skills. Because if they're not able to communicate in writing, that's not the death knell of their application, but we may pass on to someone who can write. Because when you get to medical school, particularly on rounds, you're going to have to write concisely.
Mm-hmm.
And convincingly and explain. And that's one reason why we have our scholarly concentration. You have to have a written presentation at the end of the year for that.
Yeah. And I think when you said you have to be a good writer, and sometimes I feel that some students, they are compensating because they think they don't think they're a good enough writer or strong enough writer, and then they start writing with a thesaurus by their side.
No, don't do that. Right.
And so sometimes, I mean, I think I have a decent vocabulary. Certainly, Dr. Maida has. She's the grammar queen.
She is.
And,
I know
and if she has to, there's been times where she's like, I got to look this word up.
Right.
Like, if you have to look it up, and if those words are not in your general day-to-day vernacular,
right,
you probably shouldn't be using them.
I agree. I mean, I don't have the time to stop to look it up.
So sometimes, I mean, we'll if everything seems to be fine with the applicant, we'll bring them in for an interview, but maybe make a note to the interviewer. Do they talk like they wrote?
Right.
Are they using words like that from their personal statement and how they're speaking with you in the interview? And if not, if they're saying like every other like word in their interview, then you know that maybe their personal statement was a little bit over groomed.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Paul, before we wrap things up?
About the personal statement? No, I think you pretty much said it, which is, write in your own voice, be comfortable and knowledgeable about what it is you've written.
Any final thoughts? Anything else that you want to share?
No, when someone's applying to medical school, there are real people on the other side of that application.
Mm-hmm.
And we have real discussions, some of them heated, but that's fine because I think we owe the applicant that level of discussion in detail and passion. And there's a lot of passion on our committee, trust me. And so no one is just discarded because of an MCAT score or of a GPA or where they're applying from, or obviously age can't be an issue. I mean, that's the one thing I insist that people not talk about that at all. But sometimes people think it might be an issue. It's not for our committee members. We pay a lot of attention to the applications, and there are things that I might not see that someone else will pick up, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's a great way.
And something I might love and someone else doesn't. It's a committee.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a great way to wrap things up, Paul. I want to thank you for doing this with me today. We've sharing your time with us and sage advice.
Well, thank you. Yeah. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that this certainly benefits someone.
I think it will benefit a lot of people.
Great.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Paul. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty, Christian.
Okay.
All right, there's my friend, Mr. Paul White. Can't thank Paul enough for taking time out of his day to come on the show. So grateful. He gave us so much information. I hope you found it incredibly informative. I know I did. You guys know what I'm going to say next. Download, subscribe, rate, review. That's what you got to do. So, hey, keep those questions coming. Remember, this show is for you guys. And so the back end of this show is always about you and answering your questions. And it's all for the good of the land. So send them in to allaccess@case.edu. Send us your name, where you go to school, and your question, and we'll hopefully use it down the road. Remember, I read all these emails you guys send in, so I promise I'm reading them. Listen, until next time, thanks for listening. Tell a friend, tell several friends about the show, and thanks again, everybody.